Okay. Somebody called Senator Rosa, maybe?
She's in the hall.
Okay, go grab her. Yeah. Okay, guys, let's just, we're going to take just at the outset, let me just say that the Hester bills, which are Senate Bill 931 on voting list 32 and Senate Bill 800 on list 33, and then the cross files of both, we're going to put those last. Senator Hester has to go be dealing with something across the street. And so we'll take those last and we'll work through the other bills. Okay, so with that said, let's just start at the top of the list with Senator Watson. And where's Alexis?
Yep.
Nope, there you are, Alexis. So let's start with Senate Bill 265, and there's, I think, the cross files on here as well.
Yeah, Senate Bill 265, which is the cross file of House Bill 370, requires the governor to proclaim March 9th of each year as 688th Central Postal Directory Battalion Day. There was no written opposition to the bill. And there are no amendments. That's right.
Okay, we've got motion second, and then I apologize, the House cross file, where is that on the back? What number is that? Do we have the cross file? Delegate Rogers, right? House Bill 370. Okay, any discussion of these two bills? Senator Watson's Senate Bill 265 and in the same posture, House Bill 370. Any discussion of these two bills? Yes, sure.
I understand the bill, but what is the nexus with the state of Maryland for this?
Yes,
Yeah.
what is the next? What does that mean?
Just that. I mean, what does, I think these folks, they're good I mean, it's a great story, but what is the nexus to the state of Maryland of this?
You mean connection?
Yeah, my bad. I'm sorry. Yeah, connection. Sorry.
English.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an interesting way you put that. So we celebrate many things whose origin does not originate in the state of Maryland. This is with what we've been doing with the military. This is representing the first all women's, when you remember the story, Black troop that served in the World War, did some phenomenal things. They are in the process of naming a military base, Fort Lee, after one of the women who was a part of this battalion. They are in the process of creating a movie being created, and they're filming now by Tyler Perry to honor these folks. And we, this is a Black caucus bill, and it's supported by the Veterans Caucus. So there you have it. Okay.
All right, so there is not any necessarily a nexus, and I understand that that's what it is, but I just wonder why this and not the 54th from Massachusetts, who had the impact that they had on the Civil War. And there's already a movie about them, Glory, great movie. We already have a pretty long list. I just trying to understand how this all fits into sort of like the larger sort of way that we're doing these things. That's all. Thank you so much.
Senator Washington.
Thank you. So, Senator Augustine, I tried to make a similar argument about Juneteenth, which actually takes place with Texas and has virtually nothing to do with Maryland. And we had a bill in this committee. to actually celebrate Maryland Day as a celebration. So we've already, so it seems like if we want to recognize special people for doing important things and they're African Americans, that it doesn't matter if they're, from Maryland or not. So I just wanted to give us an example of when we just did, where we just voted something that has absolutely nothing to do with Maryland.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan.
Senator Washington, you may be testing my memory here, but I seem to remember that Juneteenth happened in Maryland after President Biden declared it and observed it, and Governor Hogan made it a state holiday and gave our state workers off. I don't remember if anyone, I don't know if anyone else remembers that.
Wait, well, what? I don't understand what you're disagreeing with.
So I think it was all of that was the precursor.
No, Juneteenth prior to that was legislation.
Right, that didn't pass.
Right. But I'm just saying
Right.
that it's been something that we have taken up, that houses have voted for. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from Maryland.
Okay, additional discussion.
You come up with another reason.
There really isn't another reason. It's just the will of this committee here, We decided to move forward with a Holocaust commemorative day. And I sat down and talked to members of the Black Caucus. And again, this was one of their priorities when it was brought to me. And I said, I will do what I can to make sure that this passes.
Okay, I think this is, we're going to do a roll call on this one because there seems to be some conversation or discussion. Yes, sure. Senator Simoner.
Yeah, I think I've probably been on this committee the longest of anybody. When it was EE and EEE. And nothing about this bill specific, but this is what we got into, is when you start opening up one great cause, great bill, then another 188 legislators come with the one that they like. And we spend a lot of time on that. And quite frankly, we didn't vote on them very often because nobody wanted to vote against them. And that's the challenge. And this is a new composition of a committee. And I think we need to deal with that going forward after the session, thinking how we're going to handle these, because they're going to keep coming. And it's going to be hard to say no.
I think that once we went with the Holocaust Remembrance Day, I'm just going to be, which did open a bit of a Pandora's box. We had other Holocaust related issues, curriculum. So, I'm just telling you that the Holocaust Remembrance Day was not the curriculum bill, in that case, Senator Kramer. So yes, I think that's a fair point that once you open it up, I'm just telling you that once we did it this session, I think, these other holidays and remembrances, we had Delegate Bhandari here for his day today. And so that is, I think, where we found ourselves after we crossed the Rubicon a little bit, but we are where we are, and we can't go back and change anything to this. So anybody want to weigh in on this? Because we'll just take a roll call and we'll deal with it. Senator Lewis Young.
I agree, and I brought this up when I was in the House, that at some point we really ought to develop some guidelines for going forward as to what constitutes a day or a state, whatever, and then just live within those parameters.
And I would just also observe this session in particular, the House sent over a bazillion of them, 135-0, which puts us in a bit of an awkward spot as well. So if we're going to do that, I think it needs to be a by chamber kind of collective consensus on those kind of guidelines. It can't just be, I think it's hard for just the Senate to have guidelines that are not abided by the House. So look, I think we understand kind of the pitfalls and the puts and the gets and some of the complexity. And that said, we have a bill in front of us. And was there a motion? Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Observation. I was looking at the fiscal, it took several years of or Senator Obie Patterson worked hard, very hard, but it took multiple years for him to be able to get that Tuskegee Airman Day through. And that actually, I believe we passed it out of the Senate multiple times and it kept getting hung up in the House. So that's kind of worked on both sides just historically. But that's one I can think of that I can remember, him working very diligently for multiple years to get that through.
Okay, so I would say during the interim, there should be a conversation, House and Senate, about guidelines. Should there be nexus? These are the criteria I think that we should develop, but I think that's a 2024 conversation. We are where we are right now with these bills. And we're just going to have to take a vote one way or the other. Senator Carozza?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm supporting Senate Bills 265, but also with understanding that if we pass this, which I expect we would, that if we're going to pass a bill like Delegate Bonderi's bill, that there would then be the consideration on the House side for Senate Bill 265. So perhaps that could be conveyed as well.
Yeah, we already have both.
There are no cross. Okay. I just want to make sure that if we do that, that this fine bill is considered as well on the other side.
Okay, was there a motion on the table from Senator Watson? Senator Watson, did you move favorable on this or? Okay, so we have a motion favorable in a second. Let's just do a roll call and there's no amendments. It's just a favorable motion. And
All right, Senator Kagan.
I announced when I very reluctantly voted for the Holocaust Remembrance Day that I never vote for these things. And I have a long history of 8 years in the House, and this is my 9th year in the Senate, and I have voted against everything like this with almost no exception. Out of courtesy to Senator Watson and the caucus, the Black Caucus, the Veterans Caucus, I will abstain.
Senator Kagan abstains. Senator Augustine? Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion?
Yeah.
Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson?
Yes.
Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis-Young?
Yes.
Senator Lewis-Young, yes. Senator Brooks?
yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza?
Yes.
Senator Carozza, yes. Senator Hester? Senator Hester abstains. Senator Washington?
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simonair?
Yes.
Senator Simonair, yes. And Senator Feldman?
Yes, 9, 2 abstentions. That bill carries. Is everybody okay? Raise your hand if you're okay for House Bill crossfile, that your vote will count for that as well. Just raise your hand. And then it'll be a
Wait,
9.
but it will count the.
It'll count, it'll be the same vote. 9, 2 abstentions, 0 unfavorable. Yes.
Voting on.
Oh,
just
I'm
got
sorry.
back. And so now that I know which bill, I'd like to be
Okay.
voted in the green for both.
Okay. Both bills. Okay, so the vote is actually 10, 1 abstention. And that bill carries. Again, House Bill 370 and Senate Bill 265. Let's leave the Hester bills through some of the other bills, and then we'll come back to the Hester bill. Let's go down to April, House Bill 6, Delegate Hill. And that one too, I believe, do we have the
We do. I didn't put it on, but we
Okay.
can vote it if we want to.
okay, we have a cross-file thing from Senator Lamb.
Senator Lamb.
Right. Okay, this is House Bill 6.
Okay.
It's Delegate Hill.
House Bill 6, Department of General Services, Energy Conserving Standards, Maryland Sustainable Buildings Act of 2023. This bill requires the Department of General Services to 1, establish standards for state buildings to conserve energy and minimize adverse impacts on birds as specified, and 2, update the standards every 5 years. The Secretary of General Services must adopt regulations to carry out the bill. There are no amendments to the House bill, but if we move the Senate, we would have to amend to conform.
Okay, discussion about House Bill 6. Yes, Senator Gallion.
This, talking about birds, but I'm thinking of groundhogs right now because we've heard this bill multiple times. I'm trying to just relate how this, if this is kind of the same posture as the ones we've had in recent years, but we're trying to save birds. I read somewhere that the #1 killer of birds are cats. So hopefully we don't come back with a bill next year that limits our feline friends or anything.
Okay, any other commentary or questions or discussion? Yes, Senator Augustine, then we'll go to Senator Carozza. Senator Augustine.
So we're looking to act on House Bill 6, but not Senate Bill 92?
No, I think April mentioned she just didn't put it on the list, but if we do, we have the bill number, we would have act on both.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Senator Carozza.
So those of us who have served in the House and now over here, this is deja vu. This bill keeps coming back. Maryland Department of General Services, you know, they're not supporting it, they're just giving a letter of information. You know, in the whole scheme of things, you know, it almost becomes you pass something like this and then, you know, talk radio is all about the bird bill. So I will be opposing this.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, well, then let's take a roll call on this one. And this, what's the Senate bill? Okay, folks, if it's okay, this vote will count as a vote for both bills and you'll just conform and amend. Is everybody okay with that? Either way, up or down, but however you want, it'll be for both Senate Bill 92 and House Bill 6. So was there a motion? Was there a motion? Okay. Senator Lewis Young, Senator Brooks, second. Let's do a roll call on this one.
All right, Senator Kagan.
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine. Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion.
No.
Senator Gallion, no. Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young. Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks.
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza.
No.
Senator Carozza, no. Senator Hester. Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simoneer.
I'm sorry, I was tweeting.
Senator Simoneer, no. Senator Feldman.
Yes, bill carries 8-3. Let's just go back over, since today we spent some time on the floor dealing with electric vehicle infrastructure. House Bill 834 on voting list 33. Alexis, why don't you describe what that bill does? Let's just take that up and then go back to
Okay.
voting list 32.
House Bill 834, Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Requirements, Electric Vehicle Charging Reliability Act requires the Public Service Commission to expand their current electric vehicle pilot program to allow electric companies to install electric vehicle charging stations in new and existing multifamily dwellings. This expansion will terminate by December 31st, 2025. It requires electric companies that operate electric vehicle charging networks to maintain an average uptime, so availability or consistency of charging energy of 97%. Requires an electric company that operates a charging station or network to submit a quarterly report to the PSC. A participating electric company that fails to meet that 97% standard has to file a corrective action plan with the Public Service Commission. There are two sets of sponsor amendments in this separate packet. The first clarifies that termination of the multifamily expansion of the pilot program does not impact current electric vehicle programs that were in effect prior to the implementation of the bill, removes the 97% uptime requirement and broadens it to allow for conformity with federal standards or another standard that's approved by the commission. And this is in response to some of the issues raised in testimony. And sponsor amendment number 2 modifies the quarterly report to be submitted to the Public Service Commission by removing the requirement that electric companies include rate of successful completion in that report.
Okay, let's open up this for discussion. Okay, any discussion about? Yeah, we're
Yep,
going over to
834.
the other list on House Bill 834, which had no crossfile. We had Delegate Fraser Hidalgo here last week dealing with PSC, the pilot program, and expanding it to the multifamily space, that type of thing, and the other portions of the amendment. Any questions of Alexis just about the amendments? Yes, Senator Simoneer.
I wasn't here for this one, so can you just give me a brief what the current pilot program does, and then this expands it to multi housing, and then do the utilities need a pilot program to do this? Or is this something that they don't want to do and we're trying to mandate that they do it? I'm just trying to understand real high level.
So the pilot program helps them with rebates and incentives. So it's sort of incentivizing them to improve and update this technology. Do they need a codified pilot program to do it? Maybe not, but I think they would argue that having those statutory incentives certainly helps. And rebates that are vetted through the Public Service Commission. The other part of the question, I'm not entirely sure I recall it. But essentially since like 2019, they have been pushing out programs and infrastructure for electric vehicle charging. And this one in particular is to kind of come in line with the times for multifamily dwellings, because there isn't the access to charging stations when you live like in an apartment or a duplex in the same way you would with a single family residence.
Kind of gets into the debate we had.
Yeah, well, I would say, and I'll yield back to you, but I would say this morning, if, we pared back the private sector builder developer bill to exclude multi-dwelling units because that got sent to a study because it's a little complicated. I think here you have the utilities stepping in to that void that the private sector has not maybe stepped into in a bold way. That's why we have the utilities partnering with incentives to put these charging stations in this infrastructure in place there. So I kind of look at the bills. We have a basically public infrastructure through the utilities is building out, but then the bill we have on the floor is really requiring the private sector to step in for new construction. But we punted the ball on the multi-dwelling units because it was a bit complicated, and then we sent that to a study that we'll get back from MEA. So it's all part of, I guess, the broader conversation about building out an infrastructure in our state as we move to the California vehicle emission standard. So, anyway, I'll yield back to you.
So I'm just trying to put all these bills together. So the one was through the private industry. So this is going through the utilities.
Right.
And so they install it, and then just walk me through a scenario. I live in a multi-housing facility. I can just go plug into it free of charge, or how's that work?
So I'm not sure if you have to pay to plug it in. They would offer it at that place, like at this multifamily dwelling unit that meets those particular standards. For the, PSC to approve the program in general, it would have to be within the service territory, of course, of, that.
Hey,
of
Alexis,
the
I see,
utility company.
Lisa Smith here.
sure.
She may be able to add because, this has to go through the PSC and all that.
Sure.
Could be helpful.
Thanks, Alexis. Yes, I imagine in the current pilot, the utilities are allowed to charge the users. So I imagine it could be the same. I believe it just extends the current program. So I think that would still be allowed.
So this would be just, I heard on the floor, like a credit card. You pay at the unit to get it charged. I mean.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Any other questions for Lisa Smith from PSC on this piece of legislation? Okay. Any further discussion? Anybody want to move the amendments? Yeah, Senator Lewis Young, is there a second on these amendments from the House sponsor? Okay, is there a second? Okay, I'll second them. Okay. All in favor of the amendments, raise your hand. Okay, all opposed, amendments carry. We've got House Bill 834 as amended before us. Is there any further discussion about this bill? Yes, Senator, yeah, absolutely, Senator Sabaneri.
So I'm looking at the fiscal note, and it says the PSC can handle the requirements. I don't see the cost. Do we know how much you said incentives?
Mhm.
How much is allocated for incentives for this?
That would probably be in an order. That may be a question that's a little better suited for the PSC.
Lisa, do you have some input on that question?
Or is this like a rate question too? Because.
Well, I was just looking at the fiscal note because
Mhm.
I imagine if there's incentives to get them to
Mhm.
build it, it's
Mhm.
500,000, 5 million, and I don't see it in the fiscal note. I'm just curious.
No, but the ratepayer piece is a little less significant, but.
Okay.
It's like-
Senator, I don't believe there's a specific amount indicated, but there would be a reasonable cost limit by the PSC. So there would be a process at the commission where the commission could set a limit
On incentives.
as in implementing the programs, of course, with open hearings, stakeholder participation and all that, but yes.
So again, I'm just trying to understand. So if they come, a utility comes back and says it's going to cost us $20 million to do this. Does that $20 million get put back to the ratepayers, or do they get incentives to build the 20 million? I'm just trying to figure out the process.
Right, I believe the utility would make a proposal to the commission, but there would not be an automatic approval to an unlimited amount. There would be a process where they could approve all of the request, or it could be lower depending on what the other stakeholders, maybe the People's Council come in, they want fewer to charge. So there would be a process, but yes, the cost they would have cost recovery for the distribution charge.
Okay, so that just sounds like a capital project that gets reimbursed through the ratepayers, not incentives.
Well, the incentives help to invite the utility companies and the ratepayer impact. So fiscal notes talks about the capacity for.
Alexis, put, okay. And just while you're gonna answer, but just to reiterate, this is an existing pilot program. All the bill's really doing is expanding it. I'm just looking at the language to existing multifamily dwellings in underserved communities. So it's expanding the pilot under the current pilot. They're not authorized to get into that lane. And this is expanding the pilot into a place where it's more challenging to have EV charging infrastructure. So, but
No,
I'll
I
go back to
understand
the
that.
broader pilot, which is, debate, I guess, what happened in 2019. But yeah, go
So
on.
I understand that now, but I also am saying it's going to cost money, and who's going to pay the bill? That's because when you expand it, it costs. I'm just trying to find out. I've heard incentives that the utilities will get money back through incentives, but I also heard more of it's like a capital project that they can pass on to the ratepayer. And do we have any idea how much this could cost?
Senator, and I did just find, so under 7903, I think Alexis may have spoken to this, the commission shall by order of regulation and subject to reasonable cost limitations balanced with the public interest. So there is legislative direction to manage the costs, and then they could do a rulemaking, pass regulations, have an order. What would happen is it's a two-stage process. The request would come in to build the chargers. They would do that. And then separately, they would get cost recovery when they come in for a rate case. So for example, BG&E is in for a rate case now. It's a multi-year plan. So for 3 years. And then that is a fully litigated 6-month process where they have to show that they spent these were prudent expenditures, go through the whole entire process. So that, I don't know if that answers your question. They do own the chargers. They do own the equipment.
Okay, so this will be my last question. I'll move on. I'm just trying to get a scope of the cost. Is this like a $1 million project or just $100 million project?
Unfortunately, I don't think we would know that until the utilities filed with us, but it would be in the filings and assessed at that time. I don't believe there's a number available right now. My apologies.
And I will say to pick up on the ratepayer piece, the fiscal note talks about, with a lot of these bills that we pass, the ultimate impact to the ratepayer is sort of indeterminate because we just don't know upfront what some of these costs will be. But it mentions that because of the position of the budget, this is one of the ones where the ratepayer impact would be a little limited. But as Lisa mentioned, I don't have anything to suggest how much has currently been expended by the utility companies for it and like current ratepayer impact, unfortunately.
We could certainly, as far as what's already been approved in the current pilot, that's something I don't have right in front of me, but I'd be happy to bring that back to the committee if that would be helpful.
Okay, I mean, if anybody needs more information before we take a vote, I mean, what's that?
Okay. I can bring that back before you get to the floor, Senator.
Okay, well, let's, we had the amendments carried and so we could do that. We could vote on the bill and then with the understanding before we get to the floor, we have that information. So is there a motion on the bill as amended? A motion from Senator Kagan, Senator Young. Further discussion about the bill before we take a vote? Okay, well, all in favor of the bill, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, so we've got 8-2, 1 abstention. That bill carries. It occurs to me, we do have some bills here on the list that actually the Senate cross files have already passed out of this committee in full Senate. So let's go to those next. House Bill 11, which is Delegate Stewart, the cross file with Senate Bill 483. So April, why don't you describe that? And again, I believe we've already passed Senate Bill 483. So let's take that next.
All right, so House Bill 11, Private Well Safety Act of 2023. This bill requires the Maryland Department of the Environment by December 31st, 2026 to adopt regulations to identify a list of additional standards for water quality testing that the department deems necessary for each county or a specific area within a county. Additionally, subject to the availability of funding and in consultation with the Department of Information Technology, the department must utilize an online portal to receive specified water quality testing results, upload certificates of potability and other water quality testing results, and provide public access to that information. Finally, the bill establishes water quality testing requirements for contracts for the sale of real property that has a private or domestic water well supply. This does differ from the Senate cross-file, Senate Bill 483, as it passed the Senate. The House struck provisions of the bill which around the establishment of a private well safety grant program and the creation of a special fund for that program. I will note that the Department of the Environment prefers the House version as a first step towards implementing sort of more oversight of private well testing. There is also an amendment in your bill packet on page 6. The reprint starts on page 8. This is being offered by Delegate Stewart, the bill sponsor. And it incorporates a few of the information sharing provisions from Senate Bill 483, specifically those that were suggested by Senator Hester, which require the department to share information collected through the online portal with the Department of Health and local health departments, and direct the department to encourage the Department of Health and local health departments to share information through the portal. It also adds study language from Senate Bill 483, requiring the Department of the Environment to conduct a study on long-term funding options for the detailed monitoring and analysis of groundwater resources in the state.
Okay, so we have two separate things going on here. We have the House amendments, which MDE prefers.
We have the House version of the bill.
The House version of the, okay, so the MDE, and then we've got this new amendment from Delegate Stewart. Okay. Yeah, let's go to Senator Augustine.
So the House sent over a product, right? And so that's the committee product as it stands. Do you know if these amendments from Delegate Stewart were considered in the committee, or is this like there was new information that came up and so it's kind of like technical fixes based on new information that would be in keeping with what the committee in the House would have done?
I don't want to project what the committee in the House would have done. What these amendments are responding to is actually the Senate amendments to the Senate bill. This was language that this committee added to the Senate bill. And so I believe this was sort of the House sponsor working with the Department of the Environment to sort of accommodate some of the things that the Senate had wanted to see in that bill without all the rest of the provisions that had originally been in the bill. If that makes sense. So I don't see any reason why the House would be opposed to these specific provisions, but I can't.
And so you find this to be sort of like more of a middle ground, like they're between elements of what was in the Senate bill and the House bill. That's kind of where, that's what these amendments seek to do.
Correct.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to move the amendments then.
Okay, before we take that up, Delegate Lewis Young, you have a question for April?
Thank you. I don't have a question. I have a comment of clarification. I had the cross file on this bill. So I've had numerous conversations with Delegate Stewart as well as MDE. Originally, I didn't see a real problem with sharing information with the Department of Health. That's a real positive. And in fact, involving the Information Technology Department with developing a database. I had a problem when they totally omitted the fund language from the bill because I felt that if you don't have a fund, what's the motivation for local government to participate or to publicize the program? So what was a compromise was MDE came forward with an amendment that said, we will work together to secure funding. So that's the amendment that constituted a compromise to address my concerns of totally omitting any language about funding from the bill.
Okay, Senator Carozza.
That was very helpful. I just want to make sure I understand. So the House bill came over here in a different posture. These amendments that you're saying that you worked with Delegate Stewart are now addressed. Does this basically say there's a funding source now?
Happened is the two amendments, the first two amendments, all of the amendments actually happened after our bill was already on second reader. And they were pretty extensive. So after the fact, I started these conversations to at least, and MDE and I had many conversations. They're reluctant to put language about funding in the bill before we've identified a funding source. But what they were willing to do was say that we will work together to identify a funding source. And I've already reached out to my congressman about that. Does that clarify your question?
In front of us right now is different than what obviously the House voted out, or is this? Because
No.
I'm looking at amendments attached to this.
The only thing that the House did not vote out was the amendment, the compromise amendment saying we will all work together to identify a funding source. That's the only thing that wasn't in the House amendment.
Okay.
But they've added that.
Okay, there's no reason to think they are going to have a problem with that additional Stewart amendment. Okay, Senator Hester.
So I'm sorry, I'm still a bit confused. So you wanted the fund to be there, even though it was empty, and then we're going to do this to figure out where the funding can come from. So in the version that we have right now, is the fund there, or did they strike the whole thing?
They struck all the funding language and replaced it with, we will work together to identify funding, a funding source. Because there is no fund at this, there's no funding at this point in time. So they didn't want to leave it in there.
Okay, Senator Augustine.
Yes, I had moved the amendment. I think you're agreeing, right, Senator Lewis Young, because like you said, on the top of page 7, it says conduct a study on long-term funding options for the detailed monitoring and analysis of groundwater resources in the state, which is the language that you're talking about.
Right.
So again, I'll just move the amendment.
Okay, and second from Senator Lewis Young. Do
Sure.
you want to second that? Okay, any further discussion about this set of amendments that we've described, which is it's the Stewart amendment plus it's the essentially, well, it's the House bill plus the Stewart amendment. So it's really the Stewart amendments, the only thing that we really need are moving here. Yeah, Senator Carozza.
From what we voted on in Senate Bill 483 and to what we're voting on here with the amendments, Are there new requirements in this House bill that we didn't have in the Senate bill?
The requirement to involve the Department of Health, sharing data with the Department of Health, which you would want to do for contaminated water, and to involve the Department of Information Technology in developing the database. We didn't have that level of specificity in the bill we voted on.
In line with this bill that I'm just looking at the language underlined. To adopt regulations on or before a certain date to identify additional standards for water quality testing. Is that the kind of underlying purpose of the bill?
Right. The purpose of the bill is to, private wells have a lot of contamination, want to identify them, try to trace patterns so we know what areas are more affected, and ultimately to supply a resource for mitigation. And that's where the funding comes in.
Okay, any additional questions for April or for Senator Lewis Young? We have a motion. Yes, Senator
Sorry.
Rosa.
And the whole connection between the regulations, you don't want to go forward with regulations unless you know what they're going to cost and where your funding source is. So with the back and forth between your bill and the House bill and the amendments, do we know where MACO is on this?
Yeah,
At all?
not that I know of, no. MDE was very involved, not MACO.
Any further questions, discussion? We have a motion second on the amendment from Delegate Stewart. Okay, well, all in favor of the amendments, raise your hand. All opposed, amendments carry. We've got the legislation in front of us as amended from House Bill 11. Is there a motion? Okay, a motion, Senator Kagan, second from Senator Lewis Young. All in favor of the bill as amended, raise your hand. Okay, all opposed. Okay, we have an 8-3 vote. The bill carries 8-3. Let's go down to House Bill 243, Corman Solomon bill. I believe that's a crossfile of the McCray bill. And I think it was just a very small difference between the bill that we passed out previously.
It's not small,
Oh, well, then
but it's
correct
in,
me.
you're right. So House Bill 243, the Baltimore City Young Readers Program and Young Readers Matching Grant Program alterations. The bills don't match, even though they're cross files, because thankfully the House Counsel noticed that it was drafted in the wrong place initially when it was passed last year. So that version of the Senate version of this House version reflects it being drafted in the correct place. However, when he drafted it, there is a slight error. So even though we can't pass it clean, we need a technical amendment to clean that up. But otherwise, this bill transfers the Baltimore City Young Readers Program and the Young Readers Matching Grant Program from the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services to the Maryland State Library Agency, and requires the state librarian to administer both programs. The bill requires the governor to include $350,000 rather than $250,000 in the annual budget bill for the grant program. By December 1, 2024, and every year thereafter, the State Library Board must report to the General Assembly on the effectiveness of the matching grant program and collect statistics and other information necessary for this purpose. As I said, there is one amendment and it's technical in nature.
Okay, so we have one technical amendment.
Move the technical.
Okay, we have a technical amendment motion. Is there a second on the technical amendment? Senator Simon Ayer, all in favor of the technical amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, that amendment carries. We do have House Bill 243 in front of us with that technical amendment. Is there a motion? Motion from Senator Kagan, second. Senator Brooks, okay, House Bill 243 as amended. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries unanimously. Let's go down to the bottom. I think this is another one we moved out, the House Bill 325, 390.
Yep.
came out
House
of this
Bill
committee.
325, provision of veterinary services, practice of veterinary medicine, and rabies vaccine. This bill requires the State Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners to establish an expedited process to authorize out-of-state veterinary practitioners to become licensed to practice veterinary medicine in the state. Bill also requires the Secretary of Health to allow registered veterinary technicians or other clinical staff who work in or for an animal shelter or animal control facility to administer rabies vaccines subject to specified conditions. There are amendments in your bill packet on page 42 by the bill sponsor, Delegate Terrasa. This conforms the bill to Senate Bill 390 by adding language around the licensing of animal control facilities for rabies vaccine administration. This was language that was added to the Senate cross file through a floor amendment. So again, these amendments just conform it to the Senate bill.
Okay, so this, the House is conforming with these amendments to the bill that we passed, Senate Bill 390. Anybody want to move those conforming amendments? Senator Lewis Young, second, Senator Gallion, all in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, amendments carry. Bill is in front of us as amended, House Bill 325. Discussion? Okay, all in favor, House Bill 325 is amended, raise your hand. All opposed, bill carries unanimously. Let's just go to the back again. We've got some bills that we moved out of this chamber and cross files. Let's go to House Bill 535, which I believe is cross file of Senator Kagan, Delegate Feldmark's bill. Stacy, again on 535.
House Bill 535, election law ballots, issuance, processing, and reporting procedures. This bill makes changes to the state election law relating to the issuance of absentee ballots, the start of absentee ballot processing during an election, the definition of canvass, a voter's ability to correct a failure to sign the oath on an absentee ballot envelope, instances where a local board of elections receives more than one ballot from the same individual, and reporting of election results by precinct. There is one amendment from Senator Kagan on page 55 of your vote packet. And this amendment alters the requirements for when a local board must record receipt of an absentee ballot in the statewide voter registration system to allow for 4 business days after receipt of an internet or fax delivered ballot, which matches it with the Senate version. It prohibits a local board from conducting vote tabulation, which is the aggregation of votes before the polls open instead of before they close on election day. That also conforms it with the Senate version. It prohibits a local board from releasing absentee ballot vote totals before the polls close on the election day, which is also the same as the Senate. And it adds language moving primary election day and the Baltimore City municipal election office elections to the second Tuesday in May in 2024.
Okay, Senator Kagan, do you want to weigh in at all on this?
I would. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, we've got a motion to move the amendments. Is there a second? Okay, Senator Lewis Young, any discussion or questions for Senator Kagan on the Kagan amendments? Okay, all in favor of those amendments, raise your hand. All opposed? Looks like that those amendments carry. We're losing a little juice here. Might be getting to that point. Okay, we've got House Bill 535 as amended for us. Is there a motion from?
Move favorable.
Going to move favorable on the amended bill. Is there a second? Senator Brooks. Okay, all in favor of House Bill 535 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed? We've got an 8-3 vote. The bill carries 8-3. Delegate Stein's bill is similar. I think crossfile.
We haven't moved the crossfile yet.
We haven't moved the crossfile. I'm on 950.
Right.
Okay.
That was a new bill.
Okay. What about House Bill 1011? Do we move that one?
Yeah, we can do that one. So House Bill 1011, Public Safety Refrigerants Limitation on Use. This bill establishes that notwithstanding any other provision of law, except for regulations issued by the Maryland Department of the Environment, no provision of the state building code or any other law or regulation may prohibit or otherwise limit the use of a refrigerant if one, the refrigerant is designated as acceptable for use in accordance with 42 USC 761 1K, a provision of the Federal Clean Air Act, And two, any appliance containing the refrigerant designated for acceptable use is installed and used in accordance with the safety standards and use conditions that under the provision of federal law. There are minor differences in wording between the House bill and the Senate bill. Substantively, the House bill can be interpreted to give the Department of the Environment more leeway to regulate refrigerants. The Senate bill talked about their ability to prohibit a refrigerant versus the House bill talks about their ability to pass any sort of regulations regarding a refrigerant. The Department of the Environment prefers the House version, and it was my understanding that the House plans to amend the Senate version to reflect the House version.
Any discussion? Department prefers the House bill, the House version. Any discussion on this piece of legislation? Again, House Bill 1011. Okay, would anybody like to? Okay, okay, we've got a motion to conform.
So it's just
well,
favorable.
Yeah, it's just straight favorable. Okay. It's favorable motion, second from Senator Washington. Okay, it's Delegate Stein's bill, House Bill 1011. It's just a straight favorable motion. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries unanimously. Let's go back to the front page and pick up Delegate Jazz Lewis's bill, House Bill 16.
I did have
Oh.
one other cross file if you want.
Oh, yeah, which one? Where?
Sorry, I missed, so it's House Bill 950. Did you ask me about that one? I might have,
Yeah.
sorry. So House Bill 950 is a cross file of something we've moved.
Okay, let's go back to the other page. The other cross file was House Bill 950, Delegate Stein, cross file Senate Bill 836, which we have passed out of the Senate. Refresh everybody's memory what
All
this
right,
bill
so
does.
this is House Bill 950, Maryland Native Plants Program. This bill establishes the Maryland Native Plants Program administered by the Maryland Department of Agriculture. So this is the cross file of Senate Bill 836, which I believe was still, or Senator Brooks's bill. There are minor technical differences between this bill and its Senate cross file. The most substantive of which is that the House struck a requirement that the link to the Maryland Native Plants webpage must be posted on the extension's website, in addition to both specify the department's website. It's my understanding that there's been some conversation in the background and that generally most of the stakeholders want to go with the House bill. However, the House is amending the Senate bill to conform to this version of the House bill, but will also be adding an amendment to delay the effective date to July 1st, 2024. So if we want to keep the bills identical, this committee should amend the bill to delay the effective date.
Okay, we've got Senator Gallion to do just that, to move those. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
To July 1, 2020, July 1, 2024. To conform with the House.
Right.
Okay, so
Those amendments.
we're gonna add those amendments. So, okay, you're moving those amendments.
Yes.
We had a second from Senator Gallion. All in favor of those amendments, raise your hand. All opposed, the amendment carries unanimously. We've got the bill as amended, House Bill 950. Is there a motion, Senator Brooks?
Yeah, move the bill as amended.
As amended, is there a second? Second, Senator Augustine. Okay, all in favor of that bill 950? Raise your hand. All opposed? Bill carries unanimously. Now let's go back to the front page. We're gonna do a few more of these, then we're gonna go to the two Hester bills. But let's go to Delegate Lewis's bill, House Bill 16.
House Bill 16, Primary and Secondary Education, Title IX Notice, Hear Our Voices Act. This bill requires each public school to inform students, faculty, staff, and parents regarding 1, who serves as the Title IX coordinator for the school, 2, the process in place for filing a sexual misconduct complaint, and 3, support measures that are in place for an individual who files a sexual misconduct complaint and how to access those support measures. There are no amendments.
Okay, any discussion? Senator Brooks, your light's on. Oh, okay. Any discussion on Delegate Lewis's bill? There's no amendments. So if there is a motion, it'll be just straight favorable. Anybody want to move it? We've got Senator Watson with the favorable, Senator Brooks, second discussion. Okay, seeing none, all in favor of House Bill 16 clean, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries. Okay, we're going to go to Alexis Delegate Foley. Bamboos.
House Bill 90, local government regulatory powers, regulation of invasive bamboo.
Okay,
So
remember what the bill, what's the bill do?
The suspense. So the bill authorizes the governing body of a county or municipality to regulate specifically through an ordinance invasive bamboo. It provides definitions of the invasive bamboo classes. It also authorizes the governing body of a county or municipality to provide for the enforcement of an ordinance that's adopted under the bill. And one of those enforcement mechanisms is the implementation of a civil fine. There wasn't any opposition presented at the hearing, and there haven't been any amendments submitted either.
Okay, so there's no amendments, there was no opposition, any discussion? Okay, is there a favorable motion? Is there a second? Senator Brooks? Okay, favorable motion, bill clean, no opponents. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? House Bill 90 carries. Let's next go to Delegate Chi, House Bill 144.
House Bill 144, real estate brokers and active licenses, requirements after expiration. This bill requires a licensee within the Maryland Real Estate Commission who fails to reactivate a license on inactive status within 3 years to comply with enhanced licensing requirements under current law in order to obtain their license again. No opposition and no amendments either.
Okay, again, no opposition, no amendments. Is there a motion favorable? Senator Washington, is there a second? Senator Lewis Young? Again, no opposition, clean bill. All in favor of House Bill 144, raise your hand. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. House Bill 185, Delegate Ebersol.
House Bill 185, non-public schools and child care providers, corporal punishment prohibition. This bill requires the State Board of Education, as a part of the overall plan it's required under existing statute, to develop and periodically update in consultation with the State Superintendent of Schools to identify methods to find and eliminate any instance of corporal punishment administered to discipline any student in the state. The bill prohibits the State Board from issuing a certificate of approval to any non-collegiate educational institution, which generally means a non-public school, that does not have a policy prohibiting a principal, vice principal, or any other employee from administering corporal punishment to discipline a student. Regulations adopted by the State Board must prohibit the administration of corporal punishment in a family child care home, a large family child care home, or a child care center. There are no amendments.
Okay, let's have a discussion. Yes, Senator Watson.
So I thought corporal punishment was already prohibited. Is this just adding the family daycare centers piece to it?
It's prohibited in public schools.
Public
It's not
schools.
prohibited in non-public schools. And this also brings in the child care center.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Senator Gallion.
I'm trying to remember from the hearing, it's been a little week or two ago. Were there a lot of issues in these schools that would be addressed with this being a concern? Was it this happening all the time? A lot of reports of children that were, did we actually hear any concerns like that?
You recall?
My recall from the hearing is not that there were specific instances, but they wanted parity between non-public and public schools. If you recall, last year, this committee passed a bill on restraint and seclusion, though technically not considered corporal punishment. It's kind of all of the thought of how children get treated in these institutions.
On that bill last year, was that was public schools and private last year, or
yes.
just public?
Yes, it was both.
Okay.
Any additional questions for Stacy? And there's no amendments?
No amendments.
Okay, sure. Senator Watson.
Just as a sanity check. So there are parents who pay money to send their kids to non-public schools to subject them to certain rigors, one of which might be some form of corporal punishment. And I guess the parents paying for that means they're okay with that, right?
I would not agree with that statement.
Do non-public schools currently do some form of corporal punishment? that you know of?
According to the testimony from the sponsor, there have been anecdotal evidence, yes, that it does,
That it does occur.
that it does occur.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, further discussion? Senator Washington.
Yeah, I support it because increasingly non-publics are they receive benefits and are becoming, more and more close to the state system. And so I think this is in terms of touching kids and making sure that they're safe, that this is a standard that could be consistent. So I support bringing them in line.
Okay,
Particularly with the family schools, because we're under the blueprint, we're raising the standards and we are just doing a lot of things in that regard. So I support it.
okay, is again, no amendments. Is there a motion either way on this? Is there a motion? Motion favorable, Senator Kagan, second, Senator Washington. Further discussion? All in favor of House Bill 185, clean, raise your hand. Okay, all opposed? We've got 10-1 vote, bill carried. Senator Gallion. Okay, Delegate Boyce. House Bill 266.
House Bill 266, Public and Non-Public Schools, Bronchodilator Availability and Use Policies. This bill requires the State Department of Education and the Maryland Department of Health to jointly update the Maryland School Health Service guidelines for the management of students with asthma by August 1, 2023. Each local board of education must make a good faith effort to adopt and implement bronchodilator policies that follow the updated guidelines for the management of students with asthma before the 23-24 school year. Further, each local board must establish a policy before 2024-2025 school year for public schools to authorize a school nurse or other school personnel designated by the school nurse to administer a bronchodilator to a student who is experiencing asthma, reactive airway disease, or asthma-related symptoms. The policy must limit the administration of a bronchodilator to cases in which a student has been prescribed a bronchodilator by an authorized licensed healthcare practitioner. Likewise, the bill authorizes each non-public school to establish a policy that meets similar requirements before the 2024-25 school year. There is one amendment offered by the chair on page 24 of your packet with a reprint beginning on page 28. So what this amendment would do is essentially restore provisions of the bill taken out by the House relating to authorizing the nurse and other authorized school personnel or designated by the school nurse to administer a bronchodilator to certain students in specified circumstances, meaning they don't have to have a diagnosis from a doctor and they don't have to have a prescription for the bronchodilator. If the child is experiencing asthma symptoms, symptoms related to the reactive air disease or difficulty breathing, after the receiving training, the nurse or this designated school personnel could authorize the administration of the bronchodilator. It further prohibits the administration of a bronchodilator only to kindergarten or pre-kindergarten students that haven't been diagnosed with certain conditions, and restores the identification or development of specified training for school nurses and other designated school personnel. And it extends these same additions to the non-public schools and their policy. So it's kind of half a loaf, I guess.
Okay, any discussion of the amendments? Yes, Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm noticing that the Maryland Nurses Association, the Maryland State Education Association, and the Board of Nurses were all unfavorable on the House when it was in Ways and Means. And I'm doing this very quickly, but it appears that they're all favorable now. With the amendments, does this take it back to a place where people would be unfavorable, or is this tweaking?
So this is
a little
tweaking
confused.
because when the House, when this committee heard from the House sponsor, most people supported the bill as introduced, and then the House took it back by saying you can only administer to students who've been diagnosed with these conditions.
Right.
And they took out the training parts. And most people said, hey, we were favorable and now we're favorable with amendments. We want at least that part back. Now, these amendments essentially restore those provisions. The only thing now left out are the provisions related to anaphylaxis that just didn't belong in the bill. So
Other questions, discussion on these amendments?
You look puzzled. Is
Yeah.
there?
I mean, if anybody's a little confused or you want
Do we
a
have
day,
any
we can,
representatives here?
is anybody here, can explain? I don't want to spend too much time because why don't we do this? Because again, is this going to be relatively easy to explain? Otherwise, I'd rather take up some other bills. Okay. Okay. If you can be brief.
Even food for thought. So Robin Elliott, I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Nurses Association. I haven't seen this particular amendment. It does sound like it might bring back elements of the bill that were of major concern to the Nurses Association, as well as the Board of Nursing. And we also had letters of information, which were really letters of concern, I think, from MEMS and MDH. So I'd be happy to work with the committee and provide feedback on the amendment.
Okay, let's hold this. Let's hold this bill. And one other bill before we get to the two Hester bills. I don't want to peeve off our Speaker of the House. We do have a bill from the Speaker. House Bill 982. I think Stacy, Speaker came over on this bill, right? 982. She came over. So let's take that up and then we'll go to the Hester bills and then make call it a day.
Okay, House Bill 982, state employees, programs and scholarships for human services, careers and probation agents, and state contributions to supplemental retirement plans. This bill establishes the pilot program for human services careers for 5 years, establishes a companion but open-ended pilot program, Human Services Careers Scholarship, expands both the Maryland Loan Assistance Repayment Program for police officers and Maryland Police Officers Scholarship Program to include parole and probation agents and related personnel, and requires the state to provide a matching contribution to employees participating in the state supplemental retirement plans under certain circumstances. The bill takes effect July 1, 2023, and the pilot program terminates June 30th, 2028. There is one amendment from the chair beginning on page 68 of your packet. Essentially, this amendment strikes those dates for the pilot program. So there is no ending date. It adds clarifying language that the purpose of the program is to assist current Department of Human Services employees to establish careers in targeted positions, requires the department to create a support network for employees that want to participate in the program, adds an annual reporting requirement and a report on December 1, 2028 on the overall effectiveness of the program, requires the department to prioritize applicants who participated requires the department to prioritize applicants who participated in the pilot program for scholarships, even though the scholarship is open to other people as well, and requires the Maryland Higher Education Commission to work with the department to award scholarships beginning in fiscal year 2024 without delay because of updates to the MD-CAPS computer system within MHEC.
Any questions for Stacy on these amendments to the Speaker's bill? Senator Kagan.
This is a pilot bill with no expiration. How is that a pilot then?
So there was identified an issue right before the speaker came to talk about how the grants how they could fulfill the service obligation under the pilot program, given the timelines in the bill. So they have been taken out to allow the program to continue operate. So people who fall under the scholarship and meet the requirements of the program can get the money and perform the service obligation, because the service obligation required them to work for a total of 5 years within an 8-year period. And if you have a 4-year timeline on your pilot program, obviously no one can meet that service obligation within the confines of the bill. So the amendment is to open it up, but on the date that they would have had to end the program, to have a report on the effectiveness so that they can take a look at the overall program and scholarships and see if this is doing what it's supposed to do, which is fill these targeted positions within the Department of Human Services.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, anybody want to move the amendments from speaker? Senator Brooks, second? Your second? Second from Senator Augustine. All in favor of the amendments to the speaker's bill here, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, those amendments carry. We've got the bill 982 as amended before us. Discussion. Okay, we've got Senator Augustine with the favorable as amended. Senator Brooks, discussion. Okay, all in favor 982 as amended, raise your hand. Okay, that bill carries unanimously. Okay, we do have another bill that has to go to B&T, and with the time crunch, let's try to take this up, and if it takes too much time, we'll hold it. But House Bill 503, Delegate Stein, B&T is second, so they're going to still have to weigh in on it, and that takes time.
All right, House Bill 503, Natural Resources Green Space Equity Program Establishment. This bill establishes a green space equity program in the Department of Natural Resources to provide grants to eligible applicants to enhance the public health and livability of overburdened communities and underserved communities in the state. The program is funded with money from program Open Space. This was a bill, if you recall, that we heard last week. I will mention we have the Senate bill. It's not officially on the voting list, but we could move it at the same time if we wanted.
This is the one that Senator Rosapip came in and joined Delegate Stein at the witness table. Delegate Carosa.
I think it's Senator.
What did I say?
Delegate, but I know
Senator
we're,
Carosa.
I
It's
know we're
getting
doing
late.
that. I know we're doing
Yeah.
House bills, but anyway, this bill, where we had the hearing, I was trying to probe, on which communities are eligible for this. And I was, obviously trying to, when we had the discussion, one of the witnesses brought up the issue of reparations, which I did not think this bill was about at all. I thought this was more about putting investments into those communities that, because they had other priorities, whether it be public safety or housing, that didn't make investments in public spaces. So I was trying to really get a sense of which communities are eligible for this funding.
And again, this is coming back to those definitions of overburdened and underserved communities that we've been using again and again this year. So underserved community means any census tract in which, according to the most recent US Census Bureau survey, at least 25% of the residents qualify as low income, at least 50% of the residents identify as non-white, or at least 15% of the residents have limited English proficiency. An overburdened community means any census tract for which 3 or more of specified environmental health indicators are above the 75th percentile statewide. So my understanding of this bill is to drive investment towards communities, that are lower income or higher percentage minority residents, and also communities that have a disproportionately high exposure to various toxins and pollutants. So again, those definitions come back again to this screening tool that the Department of the Environment has created to sort of help identify those communities. They do exist all over the state. They're in urban areas, they're in rural areas. But that is no, either one or the other.
Were there amendments?
No, there are no amendments to the House bill.
Okay, further discussion, Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was kind of looking through the fiscal note. It doesn't look like it really adds that much, but it talks about millions of dollars going to this. So am I correctly assuming that other potential project open space land that could have been preserved, which may be much bigger tracts of land, could be on the chopping block and replaced with some of these projects? Would that be a legitimate concern?
So where this is moving the money from is program open space stateside. So So program open space overall it's funded through the transfer tax revenue. A portion of that funding goes to the state side, which is typically used for acquisition and development of state parkland. And then a portion of it goes to counties for acquisition and development of county parkland. This is it's dipping into that stateside program. The assessment, my understanding is that the assessment is that there is enough money to sort of continue to pursue the state's acquisition goals with this, but that was part of the department wanting that flexibility of the House version says up to a certain amount has to be transferred each year rather than a certain amount. But yes, potentially this is dipping into that state program open space funding.
My concern with that is we passed a bill, I think last year, we had these different goals for amount of acres that we want to have preserved, whether it be through mouth or local, county programs or project open space, whatever. And we had to push that goal date back because we're not hitting the targets acreage wise anyway. So I always gonna have a concern when we're pushing that. I understand it's well intentioned, but I just have a concern with us still not being able to meet our acreage goals on actual ground that's not going to be developed. So,
And I will just add though that acreage that was conserved under this, I believe, could be counted towards those goals. But I get your point that some of this might be more expensive acreage than some of the state park acreage. That's true. It's a trade-off.
Okay, additional discussion? What's the will of the committee? Is there any motions on the table? Anybody moving one way or the other? Okay, well, I just want to get the gauge before we, okay, why don't we do this? Because I think people are getting a little tired here. We'll hold this and people can mull until the next voting session if somebody wants to move or not move. Okay, the final, sensing the moment here, we do have, I do want to get on the table the two Hester bills, and then we're going to be done. The other bills that we didn't get to today, we will carry to the next voting session. But Senator Hester, do you have a preference as to Senate Bill 931 or on the other voting list, Senate Bill 800? Which of the two you'd like to? And both of them have cross files. Senate Bill 931 is cross filed with Delegate Atterbury, which is House Bill 1188. And then the other bill, Senate Bill 800, is cross-filed with Delegate Chi, House Bill 969. So which would you prefer to?
We moved 1188 first.
Okay, so let's go to the Atterbury bill, which is House Bill 1188. Alexis, why don't you just describe to the committee what House Bill 1188 does from Chair Atterbury?
Okay, so House Bill 1188, the cross file of Senate Bill 931, defines the term generating station, specifically for the purpose of exempting from their certificate of public convenience and necessity requirements these generating facilities that produce no more than 2 megawatts of electricity. Additionally, exempted would be co-located facilities side by side that may exceed 2 megawatts when combined. The co-located requirement, however, requires the individual units to be separately metered, prohibits the individual units from exporting electricity on the wholesale market, and requires individual units to produce no more than 2 megawatts of electricity. So within your packet are amendments from the House sponsor that, and just a note that the loose leaf document that begins with is a unit of state government. This is to replace some outdated language that was included in the packet. So just to be mindful of that, this is the correct version to replace the version that's included for that particular section. Happy to explain more and find the page as well. House sponsor amendments limit the co-located CPCN exemption only to solar, photovoltaic projects, and net energy metering generators. And it prohibits the total aggregate capacity of those co-located stations from exceeding 14 megawatts. So it places a limit of the capacity and also limits the type of projects that we're looking at. And it codifies and expands the provisions and regulations related to aggregated net energy metering by adding state government units and agencies and higher education institutions to the provisions. And that'll allow those two groups, higher education and municipal state government, to sort of split the benefits of the energy that's been metered across the buildings that they own and hold solar projects on. So those are the two House sponsor amendments before us.
Okay, Senator Hester, do you want to weigh in, add some comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I would just add for context that this is really about codifying existing practice. Howard County has made several major announcements in the past, few years, and we've done it under the precedent that has been set. And so what this does is it codifies that precedent. And it's super important. And the amendments that Alexis mentioned have been worked out in collaboration with MEA and PSC. So with that, they're both happy with the bill.
Okay, questions for the sponsor or for Alexis? Working off, yeah, we're working on the Atterbury Bill, House Bill 1188. Can we have a motion from,
Second the
and
amendment.
a second? Any discussion about these amendments from Chair Atterbury? Okay, all in favor of these amendments, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, the amendments carry unanimously. We do have now House Bill 1188 as amended before us. Any further discussion about the bill? Yes, Senator Simonaire.
Yeah, I don't know if it's appropriate, but I noticed there was a lot of House opposition, but I don't see any opposition in the folder. Do you know what that was about? There's like 34 against it.
So I didn't watch the floor vote in the House. So I'm unsure what their posture was, but my educated guess would be that it may have been MEA and PSC on the two issues addressed. Trying to think of other folks that may have come in opposition on this side, and nothing else is
Yeah, I didn't see
ringing a
anything
bell.
here. Okay.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's just, and that may be a reach, but I'm not too sure.
Okay, any further discussion again on House Bill 1188 as amended? Senator Hester, do you have any?
I mean, when it's appropriate, I would move the bill as amended.
Okay. We have a motion favorable as amended, second from Senator Kagan. Further discussion? Do we want to roll call or you want to roll it? Okay, all in favor of House Bill 1188 as amended? Raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, we've got 10-1. The bill carries 10-1. We're going to next move to Senate Bill 800, back to Senator Hester. Well, actually, we do have your cross file. Do we need a,
Move to conform. Use
we,
the same
can we
word.
just move to, we need to do anything procedurally or, okay. All in favor of moving to conform Senate Bill 931 to what we just did with 1188, House Bill 1188, raise your hand. Okay, so that will count towards a vote for, okay, so I think we're good. Yeah,
Senator Croza.
Change my vote on, I forget which one we were voting on. Did we vote on both?
HB 1188.
Did we vote on
Senate-
both of them?
yeah.
I'll just vote yes for both of them.
Okay,
HB
so-
188 and SB 931.
Okay, so both bills carry unanimously now, House Bill 1188 and Senate Bill 931, which brings us to Senate Bill 800 and House Bill 969. Senator Hester. And this is on voting list 33, the other document. Alexis, do you want to
Sure.
explain, and then Senator Hester, you can weigh in?
Sure. So Senate Bill 800, Public Service Commission, Cybersecurity Staffing and Assessments, Critical Infrastructure Cybersecurity Act of 2023. This bill generally requires the Public Service Commission to include employees that are experts in cybersecurity on its staff. In supervising, regulating the public service companies that are before it, the commission has to also consider protection of a public service company's infrastructure against cyber attacks. Every public service company under the bill, which is pretty broad, but excludes common carriers and telephone companies, is required to contract every 2 years with an assessor or a third party, beginning in the year 2024, so next year, for an assessment of their operational technology and their informational technology. And that assessment that they contract with has to be based on NIST standards. They also have to submit those assessment National Institutes of Standards and Technology. Oh, okay. Okay. That's funny. So those standards have to be submitted to the assessment results that have been contracted with the third party has to be submitted, to the Public Service Commission. And from there, the Public Service Commission evaluates that data received from the public service company based on other standards outlined in the bill. So there are additional, quite a few sponsor amendments. There's also a really good walkthrough that was included beside some of the other documents that was handed out. And Senator Hester may be able to explain as much as she'd like, and I'm here to help.
Senator Hester, the sponsor.
Thank you so much. So there was quite a lot of work done on this bill, which alleviates, I think, most of the favorable amendments and the opposition. But just to walk through, there's once again at a very high level, what this bill does is it seeks to make sure that all of our utilities are meeting a minimum level of cybersecurity performance. And so the public service, as Alexis says, has to hire one staff member, collaborate with the state CISO and the Office of Security Management, and collect what is now certifications of cybersecurity assessment. This is the same thing that the legislature is required to do. We're required to say that, like, hey, we've done an evaluation, we meet these minimum standards, and then we submit that letter that says we've met them. The public service companies, there's requirements on them too, and that's to adopt these minimum cybersecurity standards and move towards a zero trust approach. And this was another amendment that we went through, was to engage a third party. So to do this certification. Now, this third party, it could be the CISA, which the Department of Homeland Security, which does this for free, or the EPA, which will begin doing this for free. And also, it's the intent of the bill in the uncodified language that the 3 people that the PSC will hire can be worked and trained by CISA to do these assessments. So there's no cost there. And then to submit this certification of compliance to the PSC. And once again, in that certificate of compliance, there is now no confidential information. It also requires that the same way any state agency or local government reports a cybersecurity incident, and we talked a lot about incidents last year, they're doing it in the same way in this bill. And so the major concerns that we identified and now are addressed through these amendments, it was a legitimate concern that the way the bill was originally drafted, if a utility was to give over the entire assessment to the PSC, they would then be in possession of this critical information. So we are not doing that anymore. We've changed the assessments to the certification that they do meet minimum standards. There was the issue about, whether this third party was overly burdensome. And in the research that I've done, to date, there's many of the big utilities already have a third party that does this for them, so they can just write a letter to the state. And the smaller ones have these free options I previously mentioned. The third concern that we heard was the zero trust is overly burdensome and expensive. And we actually have testimony from SMECO saying that they already do this. And it was a major part of the recommendation from the Maryland Cybersecurity Council. Somebody also flagged that the timing was an issue. So we have amended that and pushed the date back from 2023 to 2025. One of the major concerns of the PSC was that they did not have the staff, and they don't. And so one of my top priorities, working with the new budget process, was to make sure that we had a sufficient staff. And so while the bill only requires them to hire one person, there's actually funding in this budget for 3 people, which is what they asked for. So we've already voted on that. The final piece is probably the most complicated. There was concern that this reporting would be duplicative. And the short answer is that it's not. For those companies who have to do report to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, that's only covered for generation over 20 kilowatts and for transmission. So all the distribution is not currently managed by anyone. So if you're a large company under this bill, you can continue doing that first level of reporting to the NERC CIP standards. And then for the smaller bits of the distribution, they will now fall underneath this bill, and you can do the minimum cybersecurity standards for that. Gas companies, TSA, following the Colonial Pipeline, TSA is coming out with guidelines. This bill will be in alignment where they can do the minimum standards or anything higher level that TSA recommends. Same thing with water companies. EPA recently sent out a memo that says that water companies are some of our most vulnerable to cybersecurity attacks. And this bill is in alignment with their guidance from March 3rd. And specifically, option 1B, if anybody really wants to get into the weeds with me. So we were able to send a revised draft out to all of the utilities. We heard only back from one of them who has a small amendment that I can ask you I can tell you what they want if you're interested. I would either do it here, which would be my preference, or on the floor. And then there was a short conversation that I had with the PSC, and my belief after checking with council is that most of their concerns on this draft are actually not concerns that I checked with the drafter, and the intent is the same as it is in the bill.
Okay, well, that one utility, which utility was that? And
It
what's the amendment that you would like us to at least discuss or
So
potentially come to the floor with?
the amendment was with Pepco, and it was actually my intent, but not explicit in the bill, was that on the bottom of the reprint, when we say that the state chief information security officer shall establish a process for them to report, below that, and for them to define the criteria for reporting an incident, that the state chief information security officer work with the PSC.
Okay, so there's a lot there. Let's open up for questions, Senator Hester or Alexis. Yes, Senator Augustine.
Senator Hester, thanks for putting in all this work on this. Would it be possible for, I don't know, does the PSC know sort of like all this last bit of work that you've put in here to?
We have Lisa, if she wanted to weigh in.
Do they?
Yeah, so I'd be happy to have Lisa come up and talk. My understanding is that they've seen this bill, that their major concern about the staffing, was addressed. They have some existing, questions about the language. I took their questions and I went to council, and I don't believe that requires any further amendment, but you're welcome to.
I mean, she's here. Yeah.
Okay, Lisa, you're here. So we'll utilize you as a resource to the committee. Would you like to add to anything that Senator Hester just said?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for Senator Hester for working with us, working on this product. I know a lot of time has gone into going back and forth on amendments. I think where we left it in the last 24 hours is just the amendments from Senator Hester, I think, addressed the vast majority of our concerns as discussed. The last points that we did want to bring up were under the section about certifications and reports. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure which version the committee is looking at, but the version we had talked about disaggregated information. It was in section A through F. I don't think I'm not sure I have the correct version in front of me, but it was, I just saw it. There was an A.
Alexis, do you have a?
Oh, I see it. So it's on page 13 of our reprint, line 15 of page 5 of the bill. And this is the submission to the state chief information security officer.
Yeah, I think this version looks a little different. I'm not sure if this is the version that Senator Hester. I'm not sure if what I am looking at is what we discussed, but anyway, the disaggregated language, we were discussing the intent with Senator Hester because disaggregated would be utility by utility. And I think we thought the intent was aggregated in terms of utility by sector. So I think we shared the same intent and goal, but the language was causing a lot of heartburn and confusion. And then our second issue was at the very end of the bill. Do you mind, Alexis? Thank you. At the very end, there was a discussion about, sure.
discuss this, and I'm on page 13. We're looking at like line 15. And I checked with that with the drafter, because my intent was to like look at large utilities separate from gas companies, separate from water utilities. So disaggregated by type of public service company. And that is the same intent that I believe the PSC shares. And so I confirmed with the drafter that that's actually what this says.
Okay, can you just, what you're looking at, can you at least show to Lisa, make sure, like, I just want to make sure we're working off the same document in the same language and there's no confusion. Yeah, do we have an extra copy of
We should.
the packet somewhere?
I think,
You just
I
do
think
it there?
so.
Okay, do you know what I mean? But it looks like it's the same thing,
It was
right?
A through F before, and these were like at the bottom, and it's in a different order, so just a little, not quite what we sent around to our team.
It looks, it's 1, 2.
We're discussing, when you look at your voting list, just, you know,
Oh.
thinking ahead to our next, whenever we meet again. So that we're not going to get to, because this is going to be our last bill before we break. Just want to just identify it for you in case somebody feels strongly that we should continue voting. We're looking at Delegate Rosenberg's House Bill 410, Delegate Queen House Bill 630, Delegate Rosenberg 817, Delegate Henson 976, and the Howard County Delegation House Bill 1005. Those 5 bills could just carry over to the next voting session unless they're. And then plus, in addition to what we held, which was on the front, so a couple bills held, plus these 5, and we'll take that up next time we vote. Okay, back to you, Senator Hester, on Senate Bill 800 and.
So I believe that drafting did a little bit of reorganization, but to clean up the bill, but the content is exactly the same. My intent, and maybe council can just tell us if what we're looking at in page 13 is disaggregated by type of public service company, means that we're looking at all of the water companies together and all of the gas companies together. We're not looking at it utility by utility.
Yeah, that's the question.
Not cut out.
Utilities, it's all the utilities in clumps.
Right.
And so so you're disaggregating all the utilities into clumps of utilities, categories. Shall we clean up the language?
I mean, if it's helpful to. I mean, type is one of those terms, of course, it's not like defined in the code, and it's kind of deferring to reasonable definition. So by type, I think type could be size, type could be scope.
Here's what
of
I'm going to
service.
suggest. This sounds like if the intent of PSC and the sponsor are the same, we're into a sort of a technical conversation. I would say, let's get out this second issue. We can come back with a floor amendment if we pass the bill. You guys can work for, to clear up this. As long as the intent is the same, then I think this is wordsmithing. I don't think we have to spend a lot of time here in the committee, getting the nailed down. What was the second issue, Lisa, though? You indicated there was a second topic that.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to the center for pointing me in the right direction with the reorganization. I got it now. So the second issue was looking at page 7 of, I believe, the version we're looking at. D, each public service company shall report. So the prior version. Oh, it looks like this has changed, Senator Hester. So. Okay, yeah, the amendment, because. Okay, I'm thinking we were working off of old amendments, maybe that we got. So looking at this now, I'm looking at this for the first time.
Okay,
but
no, it's legit. I mean, there's a lot here, but this is important, Bill. We don't want to, I just don't want us to just on the fly here. So I'm going to suggest we're going to be voting. We're having double sessions. We're going to be doing some more voting over the next few days. Next time we vote, this will be the first bill we take up. And in the meantime, these 2 issues, it sounds like we only have 2 issues to kind of figure out. And then you come back. Okay, well, that's fine. But then when we come back, we can discuss it, clarify. People aren't going to be completely pooped out, because my read of the room is people are a little bit tired here, and we're probably not going to do our best work. So when we vote again, this will be the first bill we take up, and then we have these other 5 bills, unless somebody sees anything on that list of 5 that they want to take up now quickly. Okay, I don't, any dissenting view here? Okay. So,
I'm sorry.
yeah, okay, so I'm rambling here because I'm a little bit fatigued myself, yeah?
Disaggregated by type. I mean,
Missed it, the utility accounts for victims of.
We did not get to that.
I mean, I think
If that's one you want to
I
take
would
up real
like to
quick?
see us, because I think there might
Okay.
be a little bit of.
Well,
back
this
and
one,
forth.
I have gotten a lot of, in fact, I see one of the advocates right here in the room. Okay, let's take up one more Delegate Queen's bill. I think this won't take a lot of time to discuss. House Bill 630. Alexis, can you, do you have that in front of you? Can you explain House Bill 630? And then this will be the final bill we take up.
okay.
One more calendar.
Yes.
All right, Senate Bill or House Bill 630, utility account holders, victims of abuse protection. This bill requires a utility to allow a primary or a secondary account holder who is a victim of abuse to terminate a utility contract and to avoid future liability on the contract by providing written notice to the utility company. The notice has to include certain documentation of a peace order or a similar report. The terminating account holder is only liable under the bill for charges up to the billing cycle when the notice is submitted. And the terminating account holder also may open a new account at a new premises despite any balance or arrearage from that utility. The sponsor amendment is technical and changes the term peace order to protective order for purposes of notification.
Will say I did get a call from my own state's attorney's office on
Yes,
this
me too.
today, saying that this would, they perceive this to be, an important piece of legislation. But that said, was there any opposition? I don't recall at the
I
hearing.
don't recall any opposition at the hearing.
Okay,
And
any,
it passed unanimously in House Committee and on the.
okay,
floor.
we got a motion from Senator Washington,
Second.
second from Senator Kagan. Yes,
With the amendment,
there
sorry, that's good.
was it a technical?
Technical
Okay.
amendment included in.
Okay, all in
that
favor of the
packet.
technical amendment, raise your hand. The technical amendment carries. So we've got 630, House Bill 630 with the technical amendment. There's a motion from Senator Washington, second Senator Kagan. Discussion, all in favor of the bill as amended, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries unanimously, and that'll be we're done for the day.